everyone. Toni Saunders here, and welcome back to My Passion. Today, we're going to talk about something that a lot of children have, a lot of adults have, even, but nobody really talks about it. And it's called processing, whether it is auditory processing, where there is an actual disability called auditory processing disorder. And then there's visual processing, and there is a visual processing disorder. It's not one of the federally recognized disabilities. So a lot of teams don't talk about it or don't mention it even. But I want to mention it to you because it's time we honor children who have a hard time listening and a hard time seeing. And I'm not talking about having problems with vision. I'm talking about your brain is processing what it sees. And sometimes it's very difficult for a child to visualize what they're seeing and then be able to do something with that visual information. But I'd like to start with auditory information. Imagine you're sitting in a classroom and the teacher is teaching a lesson. Let's say you're learning how to write. You're learning how to write. When you learn how to write, you have to listen to the teacher so they can explain what writing is, why you need to learn how to write, even though we're in the age of computers. There are things that the child is going to grow up and have to write. So it's kind of good to learn, unless you can't. Now, understand that some students can't write and they have to use assistive technology. But I digress. Imagine you're sitting there, your child is sitting there, and the teacher is talking, and you're only getting little bits of what the teacher is saying. Not all of it, but some of it. Or maybe nothing at all, depending upon how difficult their auditory processing is for them. So the teacher is telling you directions. And then you have to go and do whatever it is the teacher's teaching you. You have to follow those directions. And you don't remember them because maybe she talked too quickly. Maybe he talked too softly. You never know what it is that a child needs until it's tested. Now, there's this thing called the TAPS, Test of Auditory Processing. If you think that your child has an issue with auditory processing and following directions and not being able to hear everything that is being said to him or her, then it's time to have, it's not an ear check thing. It's more like an auditory check thing. You stand in a booth and they tell you to say things, put on music, explain why you're doing it, and then you do it. And then you listen. And you process that information in your brain, and your brain doesn't get it all. That's an auditory processing disorder. You go to an audiologist, and they test for auditory processing disorder. There are many things that could keep you from hearing, processing what is being said. For example, if there's noise in the background and you can't process what the teacher's saying because the kids are talking around you. Or you're in a cafeteria or a gym and you can't hear, let's say you're in a gym and you can't hear the directions that the coach is giving you. And so you're doing something completely different and the coach is getting mad at you for not doing it the way that he describes it or she describes it. It's very frustrating for a student to have an auditory processing disorder. I had one student whose auditory processing was so severe that they made believe, the teacher, made believe she was learning. And when I got her paperwork and started reading the evaluations, I realized that she knew nothing. And she was in middle school. She wasn't in a program or anything. She was just in a classroom. And she wasn't doing well. She was getting a lot of D's and F's. And her self-esteem was in the toilet. And it's because she couldn't learn the way they were teaching her. She had such a severe auditory processing disorder that she went through school just being pushed along and not being able to keep up with her classmates. Imagine what that does to your self-esteem. You get back your paper and it's a D almost all the time. Why? Because you couldn't process what the teacher was teaching. You couldn't process the directions. Basically, it's a very, very anxiety-producing disability. I want you to understand something. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of students have processing issues. Now, is there a test for it that the school can do? Absolutely. It's a test for working memory. Working memory tests will show you by the score that the child gets. If they get anything under 90, it starts to take a toll on them as they grow older. And I'm saying 90 because that's the beginning of average. And the more you go down the scale, and it shows you this on a psychological evaluation. And the testing is called Wessler Intelligence Scale. And I think right now they're on 5, the 5th edition. And there's a test called working memory. And that tests your auditory memory. And guess what? Usually, if a student has a low score, such as below 85 on that test, they're having a hard time processing what they're listening to. And teachers don't always know this because, even though they tell you about it or tell you that they have a low working memory, they don't explain it to you. They don't explain what's going to happen to your child as they get older and they have to process more information and faster. They can't do it. They cannot do it. Now, visual processing. It's processing speed on the same test. Processing speed that's low means it's difficult for you to understand what you're reading, and it usually comes out as a learning disability called dyslexia. But it doesn't always. It could always just mean that they're having a hard time processing what they're seeing. It can be words, pictures, anything that you have to look at and process. I'm going to use reading as an example. Imagine you can't read. Why not? You did testing, don't have a learning disability. But there's something subtle in the processing speed. And the processing speed will tell you that your child has a visual processing issue. And you can have both, auditory and visual. Imagine that with your brain. What do you do about it? If you're diagnosed with auditory processing disorder, then there are auditory headphones that the teacher will wear, one of those microphones, and they're talking directly to the person who has the headset on, or something in their ear to bring the information more clearly. There are 5 different auditory processing disorders. Visual processing, again, it's the processing speed. How quickly can they look at a sentence and read it? Or can they look at a sentence and read it? And God forbid there be multiple sentences, multiple ways that you have to train your brain to visualize. And some kids cannot do that. Some kids can do it a little, some not at all. And what happens? What you have to do is get a program, not you, the school, to teach visualization, to teach how to visualize what you're seeing on the paper. And you know what's good for that? Those highlights books that have magazines, that have the hidden pictures. Try to find them. If you can get something like that, it doesn't have to be highlight. They have other books or magazines for kids that do the same thing. But that's what I'm talking about. They need to be trained how to process visual information. It needs to be trained to the child so that they can understand it better. I'm trying to help you understand that these are disabilities that the government doesn't recognize. The federal government does not recognize it as a disability. But you can look up learning disabilities, auditory learning disabilities, visual learning, processing. You can look up all those words so you can understand what your child is going through. And they get chastised and laughed at by kids, and the teacher will look at them and, I just said that to you. What was it I just said? And your child will look at them like, I don't know. Because they don't. But the teacher should already know that the child has processing issues, because it should come out in a team meeting when everyone discusses what needs to happen, what kind of accommodations are they going to need. Both of them. The visual learner is going to have a reading program that uses visual aids. There's one that has pictures above the words, and that can teach what the visual word looks like hat. And then there'll be a hat above it. And then the student will say hat, because that's what they see. That's what they can read. Hat. Or any other word for that matter that has pictures to go along with it. There's a whole program built just for kids with visual processing issues. And what you need to do is request it in the school. Tell them that's what I'm talking about, young kids, obviously, not adult kids or almost adult kids. But you can teach them kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, how to process the visuals simply by giving them that program. It's true. And why wouldn't they want to? I mean, they should be looking at the results of the testing and make accommodations or talk about what types of things they have that they can use to teach the child. Auditorily, they can definitely use a microphone that the teacher's using, and it's going into your child's ear, and it amplifies it. I know I just said that, but it's true. It's true. And the easier it is for the child if it's underneath and in the ear as opposed to a headset. Although, if they don't mind a headset, you can do that too. But typically, they put something in your ear so that you can hear what the teacher is saying. It's amplified. Why I need to tell you this is because a lot of kids have it, and you need to know about it, because sometimes teams, the school's team, won't tell you about it. They, if you put it together, you get a full scale IQ and it's average. But there's an outlier of working memory or processing speed or both. And even though when you take all the scores and put them together, they may have an average score, it's not average for them. You have to take the outliers out of the mix and say, what is this going to do to my child? Or what is it doing? I hope you get that, because it's really, really important, especially if they have both. Because then their brain is going, I don't know what's going on. And you can nip it in the bud by recognizing the low score, as I said, on working memory and processing speed. If they're processing, it's difficult to learn. If they're not processing, then it's difficult for them to learn. And they're going to feel stupid. And you don't want that. You want to explain to your child what it means, what's difficult for them. And that's it. Explain it. They need to know who they are and why they're not learning the way other kids are. What is it exactly? So, that's it for now. I'll be back next week. And I want you to have a wonderful week. And subscribe. because I'm going to keep doing this. And the more you learn, the easier it's going to be for your child to learn. And if you find out that they have a processing speed issue, you've got many, many accommodations and modifications that can address the issues, the disabilities, the processing speeds. If you have questions, if you didn't understand what I said, please contact me. Different ways to contact me. Toni at ToniSaunders.com. Call me. My phone number is on my website, ToniSaunders.com. And there you'll learn a plethora of information, because that's what I want to do, is give my brain to you. Have a good day.